Welcome to Scale Your Empire, the podcast that elevates your business game. Meet your guides to greatness. Your hosts, Darshan and Rejin.
Hi everyone, welcome to Scale Your Empire podcast. Today I have an amazing gentleman with me, Dr. Dave Houston. He's been an amazing friend and he's a really growing entrepreneur. So Dave started Australia Dental Group in 2010. And he's really passionate about acquisitions, growing different business units. And currently, Dave has 7 business units with over 60 staff. And added to this, Dave also is a part of Entrepreneurs Organization, and he's also a board member. And what I can see with Dave is he's really passionate about building an amazing team culture, and he is really looking to grow his teams to a really exceptional level. Added to this, Dave is writing a book called as Level Up, where he's sharing all his strategies on business growth. And when he has some free time, he's busy surfing, rowing, and currently he's participating in High Rocks Enthusiast as well. So Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Reg. Thank you, Darshan.
So good to have you. So Dave, one big thing that we usually start with is when you look at businesses that are scaling and they're trying to grow their business, in the initial days, they have a lot of struggles and challenges. So when you had to go back and think about when you were starting and when you're scaling your business, what were some of the challenges and struggles that you had?
The first challenge that I think anyone who comes in from a university training base or a trade training base, from the educational system in general, is that you're prepared. Basically, you're being prepared to be an employee. And most people are employees. So the hardest part of, I think, becoming an entrepreneur is to reach a peace with yourself that it's okay to do that. Like, it's okay to want a different life. I was a dentist. I'd been at uni studied my ass off at high school, been at uni for 5 years, bought a business with my dad, and I was working as a dentist in a hands-on sense, elbow deep in spit, no, I wasn't that. I was making amazing money, even for the personal exertion. I felt like I was making, and yet I was deeply unfulfilled for some reason. And it was really bizarre. I'd come into a situation where I was working with my father, and my father really loved that hands-on sort of, technical element to dentistry. And I was okay at it. Like, I got it done, and I actually found it almost easy, the technical element. But there was just this nagging thing that I wanted more, and part of me felt ungrateful. I thought, hang on, like, this is not right, and this is not. And I had this really bizarre relationship with the profession and with the trade for a long time. And I think that is that is actually the primary struggle for a lot of people. Is they're often successful in their job, and then to turn around and say, well, despite my success, I've got this insatiable curiosity to pursue more. I found that can be like, you can be judged for that. You can, even within your business or within the small community, especially within your family. When I talked to my father about it, he'd be like, what's wrong with you? And then eventually he retired. Well, I fired him. That's another story. But yeah, I bought the business off him. He left. And then then I joined EO. And then 3 months later, I said, right, I'm going to have a year off and just see if I can run the business, get all these things that I know are structurally incorrect, if I can get them right. And I just won't have the bandwidth to do it. So it was a big leap of faith in the early days. But, one thing that worked in my favor in the early days, and I would say this to any entrepreneur thinking of anyone getting into business, is I bought a 40-year-old business. I bought a mature business. So it had a lot of corporate memory within it, within the people, within the staff. There were 10 staff that were running around. Everyone was doing their jobs. I was the owner, but I was almost like the least informed person about the operations of that business. And that actually gave me time. The phone was, there were clients coming in. So there's a fabulous book by another EOer called Buy Then Build, which I would really encourage any potential new entrepreneurs to read. There's a lot of startup, I call it like almost startup pornography. It's like, I started in a garage and now we're worth $1 billion. And everyone thinks that is the journey of business. Whereas, a much more statistically likely business is one that's, the best proof that a business will achieve a certain level of scale is the fact that it is already there.
Yeah.
And if you can buy it and you can basically have that cash flow, then so what actually that buying a mature business gave me the opportunity for my knowledge to catch up with the business itself. And that probably took 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then once my knowledge started to exceed the current status of the business, then
the other thing was obviously if you're a dentist or a lawyer or an accountant,
services.
when you're in that kind of setup, you're already making good money individually, like one-man army, right?
Yes.
But you didn't stick with that status quo. Like you didn't want to be just a dentist.
No,
you just wanted. So what was that thinking behind? I just wanted to scale to not just being a dentist and still making good money, but I just want to take the business, make it a brand.
Exactly. Like and it's a very contradictory emotion. Like how can this? How can I be doing this? And I think effectively what happened around that time was all my mates had worked as dentists, saved up, and they'd all gone backpacking around the world for a year. And I then, with that desire, said, look, I'm going to start a second clinic from scratch. So 2010, bought the first one off my dad. 2012, hang on, mature business running like clockwork. This is easy. I'm going to start another one from scratch. Bang, like just an absolute. Then you learn the value of goodwill in services, which is really, really strong. Like not all businesses, it's as valuable. Yes. But in services, especially in a high trust industry like dentistry, where trust is earned very, very, very slowly, starting from scratch is a really tough journey. So, so I started a second one and I was doing a couple of days a week here and there. And then in the end, all my mates are going, I said, I need a grand adventure of my own, but mine is going to be in business. I'm going to do something a little bit counterintuitive. I sat down with my guys at EO, and it was a physiotherapist, actually, John Williamson, who was in my group. And he had been a physio and then he'd started effectively a mining support company for the health of the miners.
Right.
With the big clients. And, I went from an environment where everybody thought this was a terrible idea, to an environment where everybody had already done it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And suddenly it just normalized it. 3 months later, I said, right, in 2014, I'm going to have a year off to go and study an MBA. I sort of said, and I didn't end up doing it. I just dived into business operations and I sort of informally studied business, and I have been, ever since, really.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize it at the time. I jumped actually 2 levels in that move, and I'd become the general manager, which is a very normal thing. So I was the general manager of a group of clinics with two units, and then over the subsequent years we've grown that number over time. Yeah.
They really like what you talked about, like how you went and started the other business unit, like in 2011, is that right? So what were some of the early mistakes that you made, and what were the learnings? What did you take away from it?
So I've talked about one of undervaluing goodwill in service codes. And so, when we launched the second clinic on day one, we had 0 customers. I actually had one, and I'll never forget this guy's name, Derek. And he came in. Okay, so specifically, if you're thinking of scaling the number of sort of business units or specifically locations, if you're dealing with a business where you're going to have multiple locations, the second location absolutely kicks your ass, because a lot of the operational issues will not emerge whilst you're there at location 1. But once you have 2 locations, you can't be there. And then, so the classic trap for entrepreneurs is they try to be. They go, I'll work at both, or I've seen that within the industry, and you burn out. And I got to that. I got to the point where I was just like totally mentally fried. And so I did what every bright entrepreneur does, and I went to Hawaii for a conference. And at that conference, this speaker said there's this great book called The Pumpkin Plan, written by an author, Mike McCallowitz, that wrote But his first book was The Pumpkin Plan. Now, The Pumpkin Plan is all about growing these massive prize-winning pumpkins. There's like 1 ton massive pumpkins. It says you got to kill off all the bad things on the vine, and you've got to put all the nutrients into the prize one. And I look back at these 2 businesses here. I've got this big pumpkin and this like thing in its infancy, and I said, well, I might as well step out of that one. And if it withers on the vine and dies, it dies. So I stepped out, threw this young new graduate in there. And surprisingly, totally excelled. He really triumphed. And I then looked at the business and went, well, if this new fledgling business can kind of wash its own face, pay its debt on its own, then chances are this other larger business that's been around 40 years will also be able to operate independently without me. Yeah. It was kind of this proof case. I couldn't unsee it once I'd done that. Yeah, so I stepped out of the other one 3 months later, much to the disappointment of father, who was like, a fool and his money is soon parted. This will be a disaster for you.
Sorry, so when you say step out of the business, you mean like completely off the tools?
No,
right?
Just off the tools. So effectively, I say step out, but effectively, I've only stepped out of the clinic room. I'm then, but dentistry by its nature already has a manager one level up.
Yes.
As a practice manager. Yeah. So I actually stepped above that. So I actually didn't realize at the time, but I stepped up to kind of two levels. Yeah. Level 2, and that is the level of a general manager, where you sort of have this umbrella view of all the operations that are going on. We spent a lot of time in.
We would love for you to break down, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Exactly what you just said. How you just step 2 levels, 3 levels. Yeah. So let's start off from that starting where you are on the tools.
So I'm on the tools. Yeah. So and this has only come to me in probably the last year, sort of after 9 years in EO, observing all these different businesses. Yeah. And this is what I'm writing, my book Level Up about is what I've realized is most, if not all businesses, entrepreneurs have similar attributes depending on their distance from the customer. It is distance from the customer that almost defines your category of entrepreneur.
The distance from the customer.
The distance from the customer. So say you're my customer, and I'm the dentist, and I'm serving you directly. I'm 0 distance away from you.
I love that.
I'm a level 0 entrepreneur.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, as a level 0 entrepreneur, you're almost like I was in dentistry, you're like an elite athlete. Like you have to minimize waste. You have to maximize your hours, your contact hours. You have to work smarter, harder, faster, eliminate weight. You have to do all the things that I did when I was basically trying to do like elite rowing and trying to row for Queensland and Australia. You have to bring this smoldering intensity to make sure every action you take is productive.
Yes.
The natural limitation of that, though, is there's only so many hours in the day. And so I've seen, and there's an entire category of level 0 entrepreneurs that are, many times more financially successful than me. And that actually really suits a whole category of people in their heart. They love being hands-on. They love being direct. And they often...
They get a lot of significance out of it.
They get significance. And they also can make incredible amount of money if you're doing the right thing, right? If you're doing activities that for each hour that you work, spectacularly compensatory, like you come across people in the finance industry that broking and they have direct relationships. They personally write $1 billion of loans.
Yeah.
And, each year and that relies on them, their relationship, and they're making a killing. And so there's a truth to that, and there's an authenticity to that, and that really suits some entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So, I think an important part of scaling is going, is that me? Or do I see myself working directly, or do I see myself working through a team?
The other thing is that there's a lot of money in there, there's a lot of significance in there, but there's no freedom in there.
And then I think, oddly enough, that doesn't matter to some people. Because they find that they scale that number of, I'm writing $100,000 of loans to now writing $1 billion of loans.
Yes.
They're scaling in their own way. They're scaling in a way that is authentic to them and their values and their abilities.
Yes.
Because some of these people that operate at, 0 distance from the customer, they love they're warriors.
Yes.
They're hunters. They're the people that used to stab the mountain lion and protect the village and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And, so for them to think about managing a team is a nightmare, right? For them to think about managing a team that's managing a team is a nightmare. So I think, first of all, that's where we start. Then, obviously, many entrepreneurs, this is working well. I have an aptitude or an appetite to manage a few people. So I'm going to go up. I'm going to go 1 level up, and I'm going to have a small team underneath me.
Yes.
And that's level 1, right? And I call that, you're a level 1 entrepreneur. You kind of say you're a plumber. You then got 3 apprentices underneath
and
you.
You're a little bit more away from the customer.
You probably have 80% of the customers are handled by the team. You might handle a few key clients.
Yes.
This is a pattern I see all the time.
Big ones.
The big ones, the big relationships, right? It's worth mentioning level 1 is the shittest level of the all. Because there's like a honeymoon period, and then after that, you start to get inevitable HR challenges,
Yeah.
team performance challenges, etc. And so at level 1, you don't have the breadth to really be making it really almost any more money than you were when you're at level 0, but you now have HR and staff management headaches. So you have peak management stress plus probably peak financial pressure because you're early in that journey.
Yes.
And then peak, so it's the confluence of those things that really puts entrepreneurs under a lot of pressure. And when you hear the statistic, 90% of businesses fail, I'm pretty sure this is why. Like they jump up, they experience what it's like to have a team and go, oh my God, this is terrible. I'm going to jump back down. Right. So, and a lot of the people I meet in EO, I see them at level 1 and I mentor, I sort of go, right, you're at level 1. Well, the clock's ticking. You need to either they, somehow some cope with it, but I'm talking I've looked at hundreds of entrepreneurs in EO over a decade. And so I'm talking from a very deep sample, a very deep data set, and I'm talking about generalities. Yeah. I kind of go, well, maybe they've got a year, maybe 2 years at that before they burn out. Mm-hmm. And so they either need to do one of two things. They need to either go back to level 0 and just optimize the hell out of that. Yeah. Jack the price and or they need to take what is the grandest leap of faith of all, which is to jump another level and be like, right, and or to be a pure level 1, which is meaning 0 customers. So no, the number of times I sit across from entrepreneurs and I go, when's your birthday? And I go, oh, it's in May. I go, okay, here's how about from May, no more customers.
Right.
And then all of a sudden the reality of business hits them that their livelihood and their family's livelihood and everything will be totally dependent on their ability to influence their team.
Yes.
Right. And that's it. And that's
a huge one.
It is the most terrifying jump I had to make. So I get that experience normalized by a bunch of EOs, then I make that jump. And then once you're in level 2, it's like you go from running the business hard. So if you can either be pure level 1 for a while, but then after a while you sort of promote someone up to be the new manager at level 1, and you can jump to level 2. And at level 2, the rules change. Yeah. Just like the rules change from 0 to 1, the rules change when you jump up to level 2. At level 0, 99% is not good enough. You need to nail it 100% every time.
The skill sets are different in each level.
Yes.
Like just it's like, and this is where a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck as well, is because they think I'm a smolderingly intense level 0 technician, I'm a smoldering lawyer at level, but now I'm going to apply that same intensity to managing my team. No, you're not. They're never going to cop it. They're not going to, you need to actually unlearn level 0 intensity to sort of begin to be a manager. And this is why level 1's really complicated, because you're kind of still doing that for some customers, but also you're meant to adopt this sort of a more hands-off, more spacious approach with your team. Once you go to level 2, all you've got to worry about is basically giving them that space, or more space. So now it's like, is it 85% right? Is an appropriate kind of metric to whether the business is performing.
Yeah. So in level 2, they're completely off the customer.
They're no customers, and they're working through a manager as well. So the manager's at level 1, and the small
management
team.
Or a leadership team. They're already building leadership team.
No, there's no leadership team yet.
Another manager.
There's no leadership team. There's just like
one manager,
say an office manager and a group of dentists at the bottom. Right. So I'm giving an example, and part of the work of being an entrepreneur is actually mapping out your specific circumstances. But I think on average, what I'm describing is correct. Like you can kind of fit it to this layering technique. And if you take nothing else from it, that you need to, the main progress in scaling doesn't happen when you work harder at a particular level or learn an extra item, or it actually happens when you jump a level. When you jump a level,
what do you let go and jump to another level?
If you jump, then all of a sudden what happens is you have far more abundant time. For me, I went from a level 0 dentist, past my practice manager, up to level 2. I went from running the business half a day a week, totally exhausted, running the business. I now had 6 days a week, totally fresh.
Wow.
Right? I had all this emotional, intellectual, and physical bandwidth, time bandwidth to actually improve the business. And so when a problem emerged, it came to me. It wasn't at the end of a long day of pulling out teeth. I was fresh for it. I was like, oh yeah, we can figure that out. And and then you have time to begin to learn
you're actually working on the business.
Yeah, you actually have given yourself structurally time to do that. Whereas one thing to be down at level 0 going, I'm not going to work on the business. You've got to actually fire yourself from level 0 and go, or promote is a better word.
There are very few entrepreneurs who make the leap from level 1 to level 2. Well, why do you think is that? Well, what's the main challenge?
I think the fear of losing the key customers.
Right.
Yeah, they're seeing a few key customers.
Because the customer is tied up with cash flow.
Exactly. There's obligations. They're often those big clients could be, say, 50% of the cash flow of the business. So they go, gosh, can I just will that big client really accept, Susie, who's the junior, to help run and this was the same with me. If I left as a dentist, would the customers still want to come in and see somebody else? And my answer is they did. Like they did. And in fact, I hired someone else at level 0 through level 0, right? Who was, and his name was Rishi, and he absolutely, he just basically, and this is the other enlightening thing, is you think you're good, but if you're not passionate about something, you'll never be objectively that good.
But also when you let go of that, when you fire yourself, you find other people who are better than you.
Oh, it just happened, and so he came in and just outperformed me by like 50%.
Wow.
At least. And then all of a sudden the business grew.
Yeah.
So that was just by, me with my sort of 80% enthusiasm being replaced by someone with 100% enthusiasm. The business grew. That was just, and I didn't, I literally just got out of the way.
So are there more levels?
There are many. Yes, there are.
Yeah.
We'll keep going. We'll keep going because this is the most useful thing I can share, and I want to sort of.
We're loving this, man. This is what stops people from scaling.
100%. So level 2, I had the time when I was then at level 2 to then systemize level 1 and level 0. Right? I went, let's write systems, and you sort of begin to learn the architecture of business, which is meetings, a weekly meeting rhythm. I read a book, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, phenomenal book, which talks about the meetings are like the jazz, the beat, and then the business is like musicians performing around it, like improvising around it, but the beat goes on. The beat is the meetings. And then systemization is another key thing. So really figuring out how to document everything so that, another phenomenal quote that is very counterintuitive that a great YPOer told me called Nina. She goes, Dave, only average can scale. And I was like, what? And she's like, only average can scale. And I was like, you hear these things that it just slaps you in the back. Because it's always, in the past, it's always been about you need the very best team you can possibly get. And they've all got their own element of truth, but I really connected with the truth in that statement that if you can systemize a role to the point where an average person can come in and perform that role effectively, say 90%, then you can grow quite easily. You don't have to
110%.
You don't have to have someone in the top sort of decile to come in and into every role for it to succeed. If it does, it's very vulnerable because there's a lot more people in the middle of the bell curve than there are right at the pointy end, and they're a lot easier to find. So systems allow you to do that. And my wife, who's Dutch, she came up with this really bespoke way to do systemization through Google Drive, and so we use that heavily. And basically, we started documenting, how to do all these different things, like how to do each and every role within the business. Digital inductions is a phenomenally important thing. So you're not inducting every time someone comes in.
And all that kind of stuff.
Not video. Yeah. Interestingly, not video because video dates too quickly for the business. But sound and, Google Slides we use for inductions. So that's been really good. That was another piece of advice that came through. Don't use video because, it's like, that's obviously last year's haircut or something, it just, whereas I could literally go on for like an hour just on the systemization piece. But the point is that is the work. That is the work. You go, what am I going to do with those 6 days a week?
Yeah.
It is you begin to work on the system, and the system is like the DNA within the cell. I come from a biology, dentistry background, so these are the analogies I draw. The system is like the DNA. The cell is an expression of that information.
DNA can be copied.
Yeah. The system in your business is like the DNA, and therefore your business is merely an expression of that information. If there's a problem at the surface of the cell, it's because the DNA has an error here. If there's a problem at the surface of your business, it's because the information at the heart of the business is allowing that to happen or is incorrect, or, so this is very much the lens through which I began at level 2 to look at my business, going, how are bad things are happening? If there's a terrible person, where is my DNA broken? Where is my system broken that allowed that to happen? Oh, my recruitment system must be wrong. If a terrible person got into the business in the first place, or maybe my performance management system is wrong, right? So, and then these are the things you start editing, and actually there's almost years of work in just saying problem, system. The system is always the solution. And the other sentence I always use is, it's never a people problem. It's always a system problem.
Wow.
And that gives you total ownership of what's happening.
I love that.
Yeah. It is never a people problem. It's either the system's wrong or the system wasn't followed. There's only two scenarios.
Yeah.
Right?
There was a gentleman who we just spoke with before this podcast. He also mentioned similar. Don't just throw people at your problem. Yeah. It's not going to solve.
No, you got to, because it means the information base at the core of what you're doing is incorrect. If there's a problem, and how is it manifested? So you're better off going almost not, in some cases, not reacting to the problem and just going back to the core, fixing it, and then having it manifest as its own correction in good time, rather than trying to patch it up. And so level 2, that is the work of level 2. And over time, more people, I added a financial controller to that team. Promoted them from level 1, mind you. So I said, all right, we'll turn you from a dental assistant into a financial controller, because we know this, we've systemized that role. Then we've systemized a BDM operate. The big leap of faith happened through COVID. Just before COVID, I'd been the general manager for 5 years, and from 2014 through to 2019. And I said, right, I think I can make another jump. I think I can, in my head, I was thinking,
I was wondering, is that another jump from here? That's already on the top.
Yeah, see, that's how I felt at the time. I was like, oh, I'm the GM. If I hire another GM or I promote someone internally to become general manager, then I think I'm out. I think I'm done. And so I did that. And 3 months later, COVID hit. And I actually hired 26-year-old. Yeah, I think she was only 26 at the time, but she came in as general manager. She took the business down through COVID, led it back up through COVID. Now, her role was heavily systemized as well. So she had a reasonable framework and a lot of talent and intuition as well. Just having that extra distance. And during COVID, I was sort of shell-shocked. I was like, what's going on? And fortunately, we were an essential service, so we didn't get fully shut down. But just that extra distance was really super, because after 5 years of being the GM, I was pretty kind of burnt out. And I thought, and just to have that extra distance through COVID was such a blessing, because it just, and I sort of watched the business, and I began to notice probably a couple of years, 2-3 years later, as COVID sort of winds down, I noticed we were really kind of plateauing, or maybe despite everything being performed really well, we were plateauing. And then I was in forum, and one of the other gentlemen in my forum, Tim, says to me, tell me about your structure. And I said, I was at level 0. I didn't use that terminology, but I just described it. And he goes, oh, so you're 3 up now. And I go, well, I guess I am 3 up now. Yeah. He goes, oh yeah, everything changes 3 up. Everything changes. And I'm like, everything does change.
Yeah.
Because when you've got a general manager, and I'm just floating in this limbo, which is 3 up. And I'm like, what am I? What do I do? How do I actually perform this role? And so in understanding the whole framework by then, I sort of realized it was time to, get 3 or 4 mentors who are also level 3, or also even level, a level beyond that, level 4, which is sort of like the advisory board. Oh. So level 3 is the CEO. You often have a business, you'll have a general manager or an operations manager, and then you'll have a CEO. Now, what does a CEO do? How do you be a good CEO was really, really interesting questions for me. But in understanding the hierarchy, I thought there is a category of activities that manifest from this, and they revolve. Being good level 3 CEO, which I'm still learning. I'm probably in my I actually feel like I'm probably only in my 2nd year of it, because during COVID I wasn't really engaged with the task, but now I am. Now I'm sort of, you've definitely got to, you definitely need to be a really strong ambassador for the business. That's why I'm doing the podcast today.
I really like that concept, especially when you are in level 3 or level 4.
Yes.
That you need to be out there promoting your brand, promoting your.
I read another great book, The Founders, about the early days of PayPal, and they talk to Elon in there, when Elon Musk in there, and he says, "Oh yeah, I do PR not for the public benefits, but for the internal benefits, for the morale for the team." And I thought, what a gift! Like now I get that. Like if I can be out there really advocating for our team proudly, which I am, which is actually my truth anyway, but I was sort of very afraid to do it. So, and this was a real sort of crossroads for me because I'd always been intensely private, and then suddenly I knew my role was demanding of me to be public. And to be putting out content online, talking about our team, our life, my values, my opinion on things. And I had to do a lot of personal work to actually be comfortable with that. And I had to, I did a lot of it with him as well. I was in my forum. I did a presentation called The Invisible Man, where I was like, why am I invisible? I had never given, in that whole journey up to then.
Cool, Dave. So that makes so much sense to me, man. Like all the three, level 1, 2, and 3 you discussed. Is there a level 4?
Yeah, there is. Yeah. So basically level 4 is the advisory to the advisory board or the advisory group above the level 3 CEO. My view is that one of the many roles that the CEO has is, you've obviously got to be an ambassador, but you've also got to, really have an effective strategy for the next 5 to 10 years. So that there's strategic work to be done, there's ambassadorial work to be done. And I think the other thing that a level sort of 3 CEO should do is really kind of weave something really a moral strength through the actions of the business. And you see the best people in the world in business do this. You see everything, I mean, the example I always give is Elon Musk. Like he's all, make humans multiplanetary. That's the moral motivation for SpaceX. There's a moral motivation for buying Twitter, which was, to preserve free speech. And that is really front and center of the business. And for me at level 3, that was sort of the discovery of that. You also, there's an element of prediction and planning out deep into the future. Will my business even be around in 10 years? What's it going to be like? And for the first time, you actually, because you're not involved in the day-to-day, you have the luxury of thinking about these things, and, in a way, level 0, you got the level 0, they're living in the moment. And level 1 is kind of living in the moment as well. But really, the information that they're using is kind of based on the past. It's everything they've ever learned is being applied. So their information base is coming from the past. Level 2 are dealing with the present. Who's coming? Who's going? The general manager is very much living in the present, right?
Still dealing with issues and daily problems and all that kind of stuff.
But because the present is being handled, it gives the level 3 entrepreneur the chance, the rare opportunity to think about the future and go, hang on, we're doing an activity. It's
more like a visionary, like what's next sort of thing.
Well, they actually have the time to do the work and figure out, actually, if technology is going to come along and massively disrupt us, we better do something about that now, not when we're out of business in 3 years by surprise. So, you just wake up, you're not in business one day. So there's a lot of work.
What about mentoring? Because there's so many people in the business, there's so many other leaders.
Exactly.
So the level 3 or 4 person.
Yeah, level 3 is almost so I do actually, it's exactly right. I mentor, the new graduates at level 0.
Right.
I take a really deep interest in their academic development. And so that is you have the time and the bandwidth to do that. But critically, you're not talking about operations, right? So I'm talking to them about their education, their development. We're maybe giving lectures, but operations fall under level 2, and it can't be so there has to be a line there drawn for level 3 to be like
that's tough, because you can go into talking about operations and making better, but you're cautiously not talking about that.
Well, I've actually found that if the education program that we've got, which we call transformation, it's got the name of the program, we're really wanting to transform people from one thing to a higher market value in 24 months. That is such a rich subject of discussion that it makes it easier not to dive super deep into operations. And because when you do, you're sort of undermining the general manager as well.
Yes.
So, there needs to be a distinction that operationally, if there's an issue, talk to the general manager. Now, if there's an emergency, the CEO needs to know. But you can't have the same relationship that you had when you were at level 2, where you know everything about everyone and you know the you know exactly what's that's the thing about level 2. You're living in the present. You know all the details of what's happening in the business. You're connected with it, and you can respond proportionally. If you're at level 3 and you just get a snippet of information, you can't put that into context because you don't have the full picture.
Yeah.
So, and I
really like how you've broken it down into past, present, and the future. So in a business, if you want to really scale and do well, all the 3 things has to be taken care of.
Yeah, in fact, no business can scale, I think, without the full spectrum of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And part of the reason, we've scaled up to 5 locations and 60 people. To really scale, we'll need to get the full picture. You're right, the full, all 5 levels, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so basically level 4, you're really looking for 5. I think everyone, whatever level they are at, you're looking for 5 mentors that have done it at the level you're at or the level above. That's just true. This is universally true. If your levels, you just always need to be seeking out and connecting with the people who are a level above. Now, that can be tricky because someone can be making, $10 million at level 0 and actually be giving you very well-meaning advice. But if you want to,
right advice.
But it's not good advice. Yes. So there's another phenomenal quote. There is a difference between good advice and well-meaning advice. And you want to be following good advice, right? So,
sorry, David, I just want to stop one thing as well. So once you have a general manager,
yes,
you mentioned something which is very, very critical as well. So you have a general manager, he or she is doing a good job. And then when you're talking to someone under them, you don't want to talk too much operations because you are undermining the work of the general manager. Right?
Yes, correct.
This happens all the time. Like you get a leader as an entrepreneur, and the leader is running the department, and somehow you talk to someone underneath them and you feel the need to go and fix the problem.
Oh, that's a huge need. That's it. And in fact, it gets worse and worse with if you go to level 3, you're aware of a lot more problems that you would love to go in and fix. So the 2 examples of
how do you stop yourself from doing that?
Well, the 2, you look at most of the journey in business is fighting human nature.
True.
Right? So it's nothing unusual they say growth and comfort do never coexist. Right. So it's not an unusual thing to go, I feel like doing this. I feel like jumping in, but do the best people in the world do this? Do the best people, is this what my skill set demands?
What about the one exception where the actual general manager you thought or the leader you thought was actually not the right person to run that? Then what happens?
You have direct interaction with them because they're just one level below you. So that would be obvious.
Yeah.
And that's just a simple performance management discussion, straight away, which are not simple. By the way, like they're very stressful and complicated and delicate. Fortunately, I've never, my executive team at level 2, because they've come through the filter of level 0 to level 1 to level 2, I've never had an issue at level 2 because that's almost like the graduation school where if you've excelled, and that's unusual too, because a lot of people hire someone in laterally and it's a coin toss whether they're a good fit or not. Whereas if you have an exceptional performer within the business, in our business, they get promoted.
Yeah.
They get promoted to a role that they've never done before, general manager, for example. And we write a system, they follow the system, and we get great results. So, I think, and the other thing, systemization does is it prevents the need for experience. If you write a good system, if your system is complete, there's a reason you can pull into Macca's at 3 a.m. in the morning and there's a 17-year-old running a $6 million enterprise.
100%.
Because the system, I don't need to hire a really super experienced general manager because who'd work at 3 a.m. But, if you were that qualified, but that's the point. So, there's also these sort of benefits that allow you to grow. And so really for us, oddly enough, if we have a good inflow of dental assistants, I know we'll have the next generation of level 1 managers, and we'll also have the next generation of executives in level 2 ready to be promoted, as long as those systems are quality. And that's what we continue to refine. And then at level, the other example of phenomenal level 3 leadership is Queen Elizabeth II, right? So Queen Elizabeth, I watched The Crown, right? Yes. And I'm watching The Crown, and you see there, so say level 2 is the government.
Yes.
She's up at level 3, and she's all the things that Elon is. Oddly enough, she's morally correct.
Mm-hmm.
She's a moral force. She's consistent. She's an ambassador. She's visible.
Yes.
there's the wave, but she's not accessible. It's not like you can just go and have tea with the Queen or, you know. So she's actually doing the same things. And there's this line in The Crown where she says she wants to get involved and do something, but she has to leave the ultimate outcome to the government. And and I think she's challenged by maybe a sister or something. Oh, what are you going to do? You're just going to do nothing. And she says, and she turns around and is like, doing nothing is the hardest thing of all. And it seems like a comical line, like from the perspective of a level zero, you know, or
She can't just go help the Prime Minister.
she cannot. She actually can't.
Even though she knows she can.
She knows what she has an opinion. She's a human being. Well, she did. May she rest in peace. But
with 50 years of experience, I'm sure she's got some opinion.
like, and so she has tea.
Yeah.
This is it. She's guiding them.
Yeah.
This is what actually the only difference between Elon and Queen Elizabeth is one business is in growth mode and one is in maintenance mode.
Yeah.
And so, she's, you know, perhaps another analogy would be she is the level 4 chairman of the board to the level 3 prime minister.
Got it.
You know, so the prime minister kind of has the same thing with his cabinet of I can't get involved. Like he's got to be a bit more hands off.
One more thing I can see.
Sure.
A common pattern after level 0 is level 1, level 2, and level 3.
Yes.
Is the culture. Okay. And what I can see in Australian Dental Group as well is you build an amazing culture. So tell us a little bit more about it. Like what kind of things do you do to have that high performance culture?
You know, we're definitely high performance. The culture is of high performance. It's like a top sports team almost but that is very different from a family culture. Yeah. There's a culture of family, which is you go into these businesses and you see an almost unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have that. Like we aren't. Our love is not unconditional. We really expect everyone around sort of expects each other to perform, and I expect them to perform. So, and that's because our system demands that. So if everyone, you know, if you follow the system, you should perform. So to me, actually, what culture is, they say culture, another great quote, culture is what happens when you're not there. So the first thing I practiced was not being there. Like, you know, to really test who can I rely on in my absence and who are the natural leaders. So the leaders can only emerge. I honestly feel culture is downstream of leadership. So if culture is simply the expression of the leader. That's actually what I believe. I don't think it's an entity in and of itself. It is a derivative of the leader's personality and approach, and how they work, everyone else will work.
The leader has to drive the culture.
That's right. But I think it can actually be it's more subconscious than that. They try and drive something that's not truly them, it won't work.
Yeah.
And if they try and not drive anything but just are themselves, it will still be an expression of that. So I feel like I don't actually have a very active culture approach. And I feel like there's a greater authenticity in just being, you know, be this and this person in this role. And so our clinics, oddly enough, kind of have a different culture between them based on the leader. The level 1 leader at each clinic defines the culture.
That's so true.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's not this active top down kind of everyone's going to be happy to. I feel that's actually really artificial.
I'm sure your entire company has a certain culture.
Yes. So I have, you know why? I have documented my authentic values.
Right.
I actually drew a picture of them. I was writing down a list, and one of the other really wise dentists sort of said, why don't you draw a picture? And so I drew this like shitty sketch, and it's still used. You know, from 2012 onwards, it's got 6 images of like a cloud for efficiency and a tree for growth and a person fishing on the lake. Freedom is a value, you know, giving people the freedom to just do their job without harassment, you know, is a core value. Freedom to perform is the actual, what we say. And then I've got optimize the wow. So there's opportunities to wow people in every role.
Yeah.
And you can optimize that. Like you can actually optimize the wow moments. It can't all be wow, but you can actually build, you know, you can structurally systemize wow moments into your workflow, into everyone's workflow and into everyone's employment experience and customer experience. And then 360 respect, I've got that as a little sun. Like, you know, respect is like the warm sun on your face. And growth opportunity. Yeah. So I think
I really love that. Most people sometimes just try to put their values and culture in words. But when you put it in a picture, people are visual.
Yeah,
all right.
I would
they tend to relate to it
We've
more.
heard that before.
Look, the guy that told me is he's one of the dentists, but he's now a paid mentor to the dentists. He's retired, but we pay him to come in and mentor the other dentists because he's so wise and he's a phenomenal thinker. And that's a unique thing in and of itself, is that often the people who retire, who are phenomenal from a business, are the best mentors, and you can, pay them $50-$100 an hour to just come in once a month, and it's a bit of retirement pocket money for them. And they're really skilling, and they're sort of supporting the culture, and that's been a phenomenal success for us, just having him sort of chime in. My wife, so in terms of level 4, my wife is, she's gone from sort of level 3 CFO. We've now hired a CFO in at level 2.
Yeah.
And fractional CFO, and that's going really well. And so she's joined the board of she's sort of going to meet up quarterly with us, and she facilitates that meeting because she's very good strategically. I've got business coaches who sit on that level, and I would love to formalize it. There's an entire organization actually called the Advisory Board Group, I think, run by a lady called Louise that spoke to a CEO, and basically she formalizes that structure of how an advisory board could work.
Right.
And I think that's just definitely an ambition for us, to complete it. And then I feel we've got, and eventually I think I'll become the chairman of the board and hire one of the existing level 2 executives up underneath me to become the CEO. That's the ultimate ambition in a couple of years. Yeah,
there's some amazing nuggets you have shared in the podcast. There's some really cool things.
I get a lot of. The more I share it, the more people ask me about it. The more people say they want to read a book about it. And there's I'm at level 2.
Can't wait for your book. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of information.
I'm committing today.
Yeah,
I'm going to release it on my birthday.
Yeah,
on the 12th of July.
That's a good one.
So I'm putting my
back
a rod against myself. I've written it, but I got to tweak it. But
awesome.
Setting a date is a powerful thing. So 12th of July, I promise you, we're ready to.
Man, we can just keep talking to you forever, because this has been an awesome chat,
Yeah.
especially the different levels. I think our audience, especially the guys who look at the scale, is going to get so much out of that.
Yeah, pleasure.
So I appreciate you coming on today, mate. And also, where can people find you? Follow
me on LinkedIn, Dave Houston, CEO of Australia Dental. On LinkedIn, I typically write like a small essay every week on what I'm thinking, what I'm experiencing, and within the business, trying to sort of figure out level 3 as best I can. And that's probably where I'll announce that when I release this book, which is really a fairly niche book for a narrow subset of entrepreneurs that want to take that journey.
Yes.
But I think it can really help them. And it's a pleasure to give back, just like all the entrepreneurs in EO, like you guys have given back to me.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.
We'll make sure you put your LinkedIn link on the podcast as well.
Yeah.
And possibly we'll have you back in a few months' time.
Yeah, please, mate.
Wants to share.
Yeah, it's just around the corner, so why not? That'll be great.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
guys.
Amazing, Dave. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, love your work.
Thanks for listening to Scale Your Empire. Help spread the wisdom by liking and sharing this podcast. And we'd love to hear your views in the comments. Now, go out there, take action, and elevate your empire.